Kia ora everybody, you're tuning in to Dr. Burst from Tamaki Makaurau in Aotearoa. For those tuning in for the first time, the Pavilion project is a wooden structure located in Henderson, and every 2 months it gets repainted by a different artist with a new design. The provocation of each artist is inspired by the Opanuku stream, which runs underneath the site. The structure itself was designed by students from Unitec and the School of Architecture, and the project is funded by Eke Panuku Development. In this month's iteration of the Pavilion, we have an OG artist from Cut Collective, Component aka Sparrow. I've seen Sparrow's work since the early Disrupt days in the 2000s, and as well as the impact he's made with the stenciling space, Cut Collective as a whole has helped shape, I think, street art and the commercial landscape in this country. Sparrow's practice plays on the duality of context, politics, place, and ultimately the underlying social themes that get us thinking about the world we live in. So without further delay, let's crack straight into it because there's quite a lot of ground to cover. So to kick off, Sparrow, could you introduce yourself and let us know who you are?
Cool. Kia ora, my name is Sparrow Phillips, aka Component. A little bit about myself. I was born in Waiheke Island in Auckland, Tamaki Makaurau, and grew up in Ponsonby and Greyland.
Awesome. And did you grow up in Greyland for most of your life?
Yeah, I spent a bit of time in far north. Mum was based up there and Dad was in Ponsonby, Greyland, so we'd share time.
And from my understanding, the secondary school that you went to was called Seton High School, which is now known as Western Springs College. What was life like as a student there?
Yeah, Western Springs College, or Seton, when I started, was really interesting place, very diverse, open-minded school. So it suited me. I started there in what is now year 9 or third form, and coming from Ponsonby Intermediate / up north as well at a high school which had uniform, I felt very at home. The teachers were very welcoming with, alternative thinkers, I guess. So it was a good school, and very mixed culture too from the greater Greyland and Ponsonby area. So it felt really good.
I read that you managed to study all 3 art subjects, which were photography, painting, and printmaking. Is that right?
Yeah, I was. So that was later in the schooling, but I was lucky enough to have that choice because it was sort of like you couldn't necessarily choose. The school was really a fundamental part of me being able to see that art could work. Or you could. They supported arts anyway. It was a big art school, which was great. There was teachers there that were very influential on me believing in what skills I had. Education is obviously quite varied when you're a creative. You don't always have a great disposition to, academic qualities, I should say. So, other subjects weren't so strong. Art was always my thing. And the teachers there were always really supportive. I also had quite a tricky upbringing, so parents weren't always around. I was basically looking after myself from age 13, but the school knew that and supported that, and just sort of kept it quiet from the government as such. You're not supposed to be alone. Well, I think you are allowed to be sort of semi alone these days, but it probably wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. It was like the medium line. So yeah, there was a influential teacher there called Peter Coxon, who was my form teacher, and he just checked out for me. He was head of art, and then at the time there was another teacher, Lily, and she was also very influential at just helping and caring, and the whole school's philosophy was more about, hey, let's work with the students. Let's not make their life harder. Yeah, so that was great.
And coming back to the subjects you studied at school, what were you creating back then?
I mean, you do have prescribed art that education tries to push onto you. So cultural art was a big part of it at the time, which was really, I was really stoked on that, but it was probably misinterpreted in the way you could use cultural art, like Māori art, Pacifica art. But there was a lot of that being taught, which was good because of Pacific culture and Māori culture around. And I get, so the subject that I really was drawn to was printmaking. Painting was harder, because you have to use all these like acrylics and you have to get textures and stuff. But printmaking was my jam. That was the one that I really liked, and sort of it started to influence the rest of my work.
What types of images were you printing?
You always study a certain artist. So Stanley Palmer, I don't know if you've heard of him. He's a well-known New Zealand artist, and he did this really cool technique called bamboo etching. He created it, so you get a bamboo sheath, and then you cut it. You actually scribe into that, and that was one of the things I took into the bursary level, which was the later part of the thing.
At this point, did you always know you wanted to be an artist?
I think it's that typical thing, that a lot of people will say, is that you sort of always know that you're going to be an artist. I think way back in the day, my grandfather asked me, he's like, what do you want to be? I was like, I want to be an artist. And he was really supportive. And that actually made me realize I could do it, even way back then, that people believed in that. I didn't know that it would be my career, but I had a feeling. Yeah, there was one particular teacher, Welby Ings at Western Springs College. I mean, he was extremely influential on not just me, but a wide range of people. He taught in sixth form design, and art and design it was called. But he just widened the scope of education and rocked a lot of people's boats in the wrong way, and that, but in the right way for students. Like, he was groundbreaking in the sense that he taught you that you didn't have to just be one way of creativity. Everyone was creative, He would teach that even back then. So it was like making sure you thought in a creative way, no matter what your skill was. And that was groundbreaking, because computers were just sort of starting out at that stage. So he was teaching Photoshop and just saying, hey, just sample this, take that, there's no rules, don't believe in that stuff that people tell you have to draw really, really well, or you have to paint really, really well to be creative. So then you just thought, wow, I can do this. And I think that was mind blowing. Yeah. And I mean, he's gone on to make films, and he does TED Talks, and he's just an incredible person all round. So to have him as a teacher at a school like that was just, yeah. And all the people he taught in those couple of years he was there have gone on to be very creative people.
It's amazing to hear how people, I guess, in our lives can change our directions. Now, one direction that I know that you took after school, and I'm not exactly sure of the timeline, but you did a huge OE at one point.
The 90s generation was hugely influenced from the American culture. So it was like, the typical go on your OE, go do the thing. So it was like, I was really keen to escape. I didn't have a great upbringing, as in I didn't have a family home. So I was like, I'm just gonna get the fuck out of here. So luckily enough, I had some funds that would come through from my dad's side of the family, and I was like, I'm going to spend that. I'm out. So after I finished school, I went down south and went snowboarding for a year. That was really good and difficult because it was expensive, and lived in Wanaka and just bummed out with a bunch of mates. It was awesome. But then soon after that, gathered enough coin and stuff to get a plane ticket straight to New York. A couple of my other mates had already done it. A good friend of mine, Aaron Ward, and another good friend, Damon Riker, had made that mission, and so sort of had like a reference, of people to make contact with. And also, luckily, my friend Aaron Ward was going out with a fancy, model Trish Goff. And so he had an apartment in Lower East Side. So it was like, oh, sweet, that's us, let's hit that. And so he housed me when I arrived for a little bit.
What did you do in New York, and how long did you stay there for?
So I arrived, I think, late December. So around, freezing, like shock. Just went there to hang out. It was just like, let's check it,
Going overseas to New York, I guess you get to see all the facets of hip hop, especially with things like graffiti, right?
Yeah, like graph. I guess graph was already here, and hip hop culture especially was already. I was massively influenced by hip hop culture already. So from the 90s. So this is 98 that I traveled there. So it was already, the early 90s with Tribe Called Quest, Nas, all of the sort of like, Nubian hip hop that was coming through, the feel good hip hop, had influenced my life massively. So graffiti was part of that culture, and so to go to New York was sort of like, the Mecca. It was like, oh, that's the spot. So you just go and check stuff out. There were certain suburbs that were sketchier. Obviously Brooklyn was appealing. Central, Manhattan was pretty relevant. I don't know, everything was sort of tagged and graphed and pieced, and trains are still sort of running. They were coming down pretty hard. Giuliani was running New York at that time, so there was definitely a huge crackdown. Like 98, it was starting. 97, 98 was starting to get harder. Late 97 it was. I arrived, so sort of the tail end of that golden era of guess hip hop culture, which obviously graffiti was a big part of. I'd started tagging when I was like 12 in West Auckland at Avondale with my friend, while we were like go out tagging and then go steal fruit from trees. That was about as bad boy as I got in those early days, but I'd sort of not really followed it up here. Aotearoa scene was obviously pretty small at that stage, early 90s. There was people doing it like Smooth Crew and, Daryl, DLT, sort of, other crews were definitely around, but it was more individual writing and tags. A lot of tags, but pieces were rarer.
We'll come back to the scene in Aotearoa, but after New York, you travelled to Europe, is that right?
Yeah, snowboarding was big on my agenda. So I had a friend who was living in France and was working in France. I'd initially wanted to go to Canada just because, it seemed like the spot to go, Whistler and those places. And that didn't really eventuate, so there was contact there. I had a working visa for Europe because my grandparents were born in England, so it would just seem logical to head there.
And when you were in England, I heard that you picked up a job there.
Oh yeah, my cousin owned a bronze casting foundry, which was also really cool experience, and he actually let me bunk in the foundry because by that stage I'd run out of money. I was like, I'd gone with I think you had to have $2,000 in the bank, and that was long gone after New York.
Yep, totally, and travelling is bloody expensive. So when you came back to Aotearoa, you mentioned that you encountered a bit of a roadblock getting into art school, but ultimately that led you to employment in the film and TV industry. Could you tell me what happened there?
Yeah, so coming back to New Zealand, Aotearoa, I tried to think, okay, well, I'm going to give art a go, I need to re-educate. I was 23 at the stage, so I thought, okay, it's probably my shot at art school. I had some encouragement, people to apply, and so I picked up the courage and did that. But the only art I had was like from my education at high school, and so I thought it was good, but I don't think the tutors at Elam thought it was good enough. I don't think they thought I was going to be ending up as an adult student, so they probably thought, oh, this guy's already already made decisions that we can't influence. I don't know. At the time, again, it was tricky. So, my mate was working in the film industry on those shows like Xena, and so, and breaking down sets. Just being a truck like demo dude. So it was like I quickly would try and pick up any work I could. Yeah, so that was on and off probably for like 15 years from that point. Yeah, it was sort of cool. Like, obviously art, when you make art, you need to make a living somehow too, so that was a good way to make a bit of coin.
At some point in this timeline, you started selling t-shirts at the Grayland Park Festival. How did you end up in that trajectory?
Yeah, there was an interesting one. So I ended up on and off the dole, or the working income benefit. I don't know what it's called now, but unemployed and needed income. And there's this really cool program that it was called New Space. So it was like having mentors and career counselors teach kids or creative people how to re-establish themselves in the industries. So it ended up being the pilot for what was called PACE. So it was like a practitioner of arts enterprise or something. I don't forget the name of it, but it was like the dole for the artists, and so there was a pilot for that, and that was really influential actually to get me into business. So it segued to a business course, and it also just honed me into those things. And actually, just remembering that was why I went back to art school. I tried to get into art school because of that course, because they were like, well, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to make art. That was government funded, yeah. And so there was a grant for 10K to do a business, but you needed a product, right? Or you needed an idea. And so t-shirts became a really good way that I felt really comfortable being able to release my art on a product rather than it being, I make a painting, you should buy it, and so that was a great way to do it. And then I was like, I need a place to do it, and Grayland Park Festival is like every year in November, and so it all sort of, the business side of it was really important. Yeah, it really helped.
What were 3 things that you learned from that course?
I think managing finances, understanding a product, and believing that you could run your own business. I think you could do it yourself. It was encouraging.
I really like that. With the t-shirt specifically, what types of designs were you creating?
I landed on a suburb sort of base t-shirt with Grayland with a pair of jandals that became quite successful. So it was like that really helped me then create. With a business plan, you have to have a plan. So I had a plan to make a range of t-shirts, and you have to show your spending. Like, you get 10 grand, you have to show it's spending. So that worked well, and then people were sort of picking that up with the other ones, so I'd try and get all my mates to wear them, and they'd buy them, a bit like Sky Pirates now. You sort of get a name going, and then people pick it up, and then it sort of snowballs and goes into different places.
And with the t-shirt designs, what role has, urban culture like graffiti and skateboarding played in your work?
It's just all sort of intertwines into each other. Skateboarding was always about rebelling. In a way, the culture sort of supported doing your own thing, finding your own groove, but it was also connecting with the culture. And then hip-hop culture was the same. It's sort of like, hip-hop was always about connecting with others and building a community. And so I was always interested in those things. It was like, hey, how can I be part of something? I guess because of my family stuff and not feeling connected, my friends became family. So skating was just massive. I'd always go skating, car parks, and it sort of just it segues really well into sort of those Dero spots, car parks, the back of some thing, and they really just connect you to other people. It's just that is the key, that you've got the same person likes Tribe Called Quest, and so you can talk about Tribe Called Quest, or the same person likes Steve Caballero from Pal Peralta, or Tony Hawkins, so all gone. So you'd be like, so you just connect. It's really cool. And Aotea Square was a big place for that. You used to be able to skate down there, so everyone would just go down there and hang out.
Love it. And coming back to your art and the people in the artistic community, how did Cut Collective form?
So I guess again, it's just the street. So there was a couple other artists doing stuff. So Trust Me, aka Ross Lou, and Enforce One, aka Gary Young, were both individually doing stuff on the street, and so it was just hey, what's that? Hey, that's different. I want to know who that person is, and so you just ask around and connect. So then, trust me, Ross Lou was doing work up and down Simon Street and K Road with posters a lot, and so you sort of try and just float around those areas trying to figure it out. But I ended up meeting Gary through the local video store. He worked up there, so that was cool. And then he knew Ross, and so then we're like, oh cool, we've got to meet Ross. And then it was like, hey, we really are on the same page here with what we were doing in the scene.
At what point in time did you formalize Cut Collective, and are you three the founding members?
I think we were, and then Hayley, aka Flox, she came on board because she was going out with Ross, trust me, and so she was also interested in art and doing art, and so she was around, and so it was like, oh sweet, well let's just hang out. And then there was a couple other people as well that were afterwards that were doing some things. We decided to paint a wall together on the back of Video Easy, I think, because Gary got access to it, so it was like, it was cool little, like, just natural.
And after this collective has been created, I'm aware that you also had an exhibition, your first I believe, at Disrupt Gallery on K Road.
was my first solo exhibition at Disrupt Gallery. So there was Askew, Johnny, and Deirdre, and they had formed Disrupt Gallery in 2003, or Disrupt was 2003, and then the gallery came, and it was like a huge deal, for the scene. And I think I was one of the first artists that did a solo there, and that was like, they gave me that break, and also I was really keen to do good by them. The space was massive. I don't know if you ever went there, but it was huge, and so I had to make heaps of work.
At this time, was Disrupt the only gallery representing urban art?
I think 100%. They were the most serious too, because Deirdre was a business head, Askew was the sort of connector, same with Johnny. It was the more serious one. There were probably a few others that had tried, but it was like it was like, hey, people took them seriously, yeah. And it came correct because it had a logo and a gallery. They had this gallery which was a fucking cool space up on K Road, and it was like big stud and big windows and had red carpet and stairs, and a lot of the TMD guys were painting out the back, and there was a little art room and office, and yeah, and then that's when the magazine came.
Amazing. And how blurred or distinct would you say the boundaries were between the notions of graffiti and street art at this time?
Yeah, well, street art, I guess, was just starting to get popular overseas in 2006, and so there was a influential video that was made called Rash that showcased the Melbourne scene. The Melbourne scene was popping off with street art and sort of paste up work, and obviously Obey was big and Banksy was big, and it was just speaking to a different audience, but it totally was using the same tools as graffiti, and graffiti was obviously already reasonably established as an art form. So this was, I think, exciting, and then the whole thing just started coming together. There was resistance from graffiti crews and the graffiti scene at the time, but the people that were open to it were really supportive, and that was Elliot, Askew, Johnny, and Deirdre were really supportive of that stuff. They think are open-minded to it. I didn't really know what I was up to. I was right into I wanted to do graffiti because I tried to get into graffiti crews earlier in the time of those, in that timeline between 2001 2001 to 2002. I was trying to get into graffiti crews. There was sort of like FTW, who was Otis Frizzell, DLT, and Dan Tippett. So I'd like hang around them, try and get into that. But the scene was really small, so that's when the stencil thing started for me, and then influence from what I'd seen in the UK So I didn't really know what I was up to. I knew that my hip hop culture and my hip hop knowledge was coming through in my work, and that printmaking from high school was also extremely important. And so stencils just made a lot of sense. You know, the funny thing about graffiti is that it's a really innovative art form, and it's like, hey, we're doing this thing, it's new, it's different. But by this stage, it was like already a young man or a young woman. It was like already. So whereas street art felt younger, fresher, like a 5-year-old. It was like, so like, it was a little bit more exciting for me. I was like, oh, I could do that. Because I'd missed out on a bit of the graffiti. I came in at a really awkward time where I couldn't quite establish myself with a graffiti crew. Graffiti's funny like that. You have to get into a crew, right? And you're like, oh, you can't do this until this. And then suddenly there's all these rules. And I was like, I felt that street art didn't have that. It was like, you didn't have to be anything but yourself. And also visually, you know, you could just, you didn't have to do letters. So suddenly you were like, oh, cool. Well, just put up this. And it's still speaking to people, you know.
All these unspoken graffiti rules are quite ironic, right?
Yeah, it's super funny because, you know, it's supposed to be like expressive, free, and it is, don't get me wrong. And I'd studied it back and forth, you know, from scene and, you know, all of the writers that were coming through. It was, you know, Star Wars was massive for me. I was like, oh, it spoke to me because of hip hop culture. But I enjoyed the fact that it was like, hey, you could do something different here.
Coming back to the local scene of urban art in Aotearoa, I'm aware that you set up a website called Street Arts. What was the role or function of creating a platform like this online?
I think we just wanted to also be noticed as well. There was a couple of blogs, graffiti blogs, and Disrupt was obviously going with the magazine. So we just wanted to support other artists coming through as well. Like, because by this stage, there was another collective called Side Room, and they'd come up through AUT because Ross had worked at AUT, and they were more of just an art collective. They came a little bit after, but it was also just a similar headspace to us. But also they respected the graffiti scene as well. I think graffiti is just appealing to so many people because it is just saying, hey, you can be different. You don't have to be like one way. But also, I think this was an evolution of graffiti. I really do. Yeah, it was cool.
Fast forwarding to your practice, what role does location and context play in your art?
Fundamentally similar to what graffiti do. You want to do it in a high visible spot so that people see it, but also placement to the artwork plays a bit more into it. So if you're going to have a guy or a subject matter that's saying a certain thing, where you put that is really relative. Like, so Banksy obviously is a master of that. So I was like, well, I'm going to try and put stuff in places which people see. I think, yeah, and just try and get up as well, you know. I mean, Obey was that guy, you know, he'd just get up everywhere. And you're like, far out, how did he get up there? You know, so it was sort of like a similar thing, like, oh, there was a combination of that. Skating was also like that. You'd be like, you had the same headspace, you're like, oh, there's a curb over there. Oh, I could grind that and come up there. So like, you know, you're already sort of in that headspace of like making public space yours.
Linked to that question, how do you use the public domain as a space for expression and debate?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one, isn't it? It's, again, you know, people like Banksy was so smart with that. Like, it's like you come up with a subject matter that is relative to a broad range of people, and you say something with your message, and then you put it in the right place. So it's not just making a stencil and spraying it up. It's like you've already thought about this and you've thought about that. So to be able to do those three things, you know, put some artwork up in public, make it relevant, and then also choose your location. It's actually really quite tricky.
Are you anti-establishment?
I think I am, but I think that it's a little bit more involved than that. You know, I see value in in some forms of governance, but I don't really believe in, well, civil war is what we're up for, right? That's the issue, right? It's evolved a bit more, I think. It's got more complex. So that point of view becomes a bit blurred now from probably when I was doing it. But definitely like that punk skate attitude where it's like, yeah, fuck the world, fuck that shit. I don't want to be part of that. Was part of it, but that can quickly go down the other road real fast, right? You can end up in some pretty serious trouble.
And your work has developed quite a lot, obviously, over the years. But what do the words social consciousness and accessibility mean to you?
Yeah, I think social consciousness is just, trying to represent or representing a point of view which, the alternative mind or person has. The work, I've always struggled with the fact that you have to make a living from art, and I think I still struggle with that today. So it's a matter of like, you tend to make work that people want as well, and then they pay you money for it. It would be better if it was just you made work and people enjoyed it and the money wasn't involved. I think it opens doors. Well, if you believe in that enough, I believe it opens enough doors that you'll find places to sit.
What is your interest or motivation for creating work that is politically charged?
Oh, I would love to. I would just make political work if I could. So last year, we're in 2023, 2024 now, but 2023, the economy started slowing down due to COVID. Obviously, COVID was a very interesting time as well. We sort of, if you have any smarts with economy, or economics, you sort of knew with a massive, resurgence payments, everyone in the country knew that there was going to be a downturn. That happened, and for art's taken a pretty big hit. But so I sort of got ahead of that and thought I'm going to do my first solo show in 8 years. Did that and just made it all about political, thoughts that were going through my mind. Just made a show I wanted to make. Couldn't care less if people bought it or not. And that was super good thing to do, because I believe that is the real essence of making art. You need to make exactly what you need to make.
What types of themes were you exploring in that body of work?
I think that work was talking about the war in Ukraine and how children are going to be so influenced from that. I did one with kids holding a bomb and running with it as if it was just normal. So, the normalization of world wars, the fact that a whole generation of kids in Ukraine are going to grow up with war. That's happened before, inequality of social, imbalance, that the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. So sort of like eat the rich type concept, which is obviously harks right back to just the punk, and just, all sorts of themes and stuff, talking about the economy, how, price gouging in this country is massive, no regulation on that. So living in loop was the name of it. So it's sort of like we're just living in this, one of the fascinating things about smart artists is they'll reference parts of history, and Banksy does that. Like, he'll go back to a piece of history that then is so relative now, and I think we everything goes in cycles.
It's amazing to see how you use relatively innocent or kind of like everyday images that are familiar to people, but somehow you manage to embed context within the images to form new or different meanings.
I think it's trying to appeal to people again, and then make them think. Yeah, look twice. I like nice stuff as well. Like, I like things that have meaning. It's not all. I mean, if you just do dark stuff, I don't know if it's right for this context of this country. It's hard for this. We got enough dark stuff going on. It's an amazing country. We're an island. We were trapped in this paradise, right? So I like the paradise side of it, but obviously there's this undertow.
I've heard you mention Banksy quite a few times. Who would be 3 artists that you say have influenced your practice?
I mean, obviously Banksy, Obey, is huge too. Like just his graphicness just speaks, volumes. And then I'd probably say someone like Jim Phillips, who was like an actual skate graphic guy, and all the Pau Parauta. I shouldn't forget his name, but the artist who did Pau Parauta. It's sort of like, and comic art. Yeah, that's not three, but.
So what is it that interests you about Banksy or Obey?
I think it's just quick, instant graphic. So again, it's just that graphic, boom, you get it. Yeah, and I love that with art. I love that you get art straight away. Ironically, now I'm making art you don't get. And I always used to shit on my teacher for that, because he was an abstract artist. And I was always like, that says nothing, teacher. Peter, he was like, but it means something to me. I'm like, nah, shit.
There's your art and there's also your studio. Currently you're located in an incredible studio in Ponsonby, which is obviously at the heart of Tamaki. Could you tell me a little bit how your studio functions?
Yeah, so I've had quite a few studios throughout the city. One in Kingsland with Siren Gallery, another one in K Road with Cut Collective. I think that studios are very important for an artist to go somewhere away from home. I think it makes a huge difference. So for me, and so this space in Ponsonby was, it ticked a lot of boxes because it's a creative space in Denwick World. They produce a whole range of services underneath their umbrella. So they have an artist services part to their company, but also they have a gallery, and they're just like-minded people. It's just awesome. Yeah. So Rakai is an artist here, and Dan. So there, and I've also shared it with Lucy Davison. She is a painter who's now working upstairs, and then also another artist, Hannah Jensen. Actually, she was here for a while.
What role do you think other artists play from the studio in creating a creative and inspiring environment? And what role do you think do these other artists play in creating a creative environment for you? And how does that kind of contribute to your creativity in any way?
I would hope it does. It's funny, I was speaking to Ross about this yesterday actually, because we went and installed a painting together, and it's very rare to find people that you connect with on that creative level. You'll have artists that you can hang out with, and that is great because you just got people to hang out with. But real collective connection is very rare, and so you have to really nurture that when you get it. I think artists are strange creatures. We sort of tune into your own thing to survive. You become very sort of insular, to some degree. So when you're working with others, it's like, how do you let people into your space? How do you work with someone else with your creative, choices?
Coming back to your art, we discussed obviously the significance of technology and the rise of AI. What role does AI play in your art, and what is your position on those tools?
Yeah, I'm definitely pro. I mean, like I said, Welby Ings was a huge influence on me for saying you can sample art. It's, if you think about the Renaissance painters, they would take like a viewfinder thing, take it to the landscape and like sort of, draw it, project it back on their canvas. So, it's been happening for a long time. I think that the pureness of art, the pureness of people who think you just should draw something without a reference feels naive to me. It's just like, come on, we all sampled something from somewhere. Even as a graffiti writer, you have to start with letters like from someone, although you evolve it. So AI is just another part of that. I think it's an amazing tool.
How is AI used in your creative process?
So I might use it to create mood boards or create an idea that will then just be like, oh my god, that has got me going this way. And so I'll take a bit of that and mix it into my work, or redraw it, or recomputerize it, or whatever. Like I've been using Photoshop and Illustrator for years, so I don't, and photography, right? Like photography is a huge part of my work.
What's your response to artists who are anti-AI?
It's taken me a while. I got into it, so I spent 1 day a week making sure I did all just AI. I was like, okay, just try it out, give it a go, see where it lands for you. And sure enough, it's landed in directly the right spot where I'm like, oh my God, look what this does. I haven't got into the user interface of it, like where it's like you're using it across the board for your, for your work, like as in for your functionality of your workflow. I'd like to. Generative AI is obviously very close. I'm amazed at the speed of it. It's phenomenal. So I think it's a bit like two things. It's a bit like the birth of the internet, and you think about all the dudes or people in the art scene that were like, oh, internet's whack, or that's lame. But then suddenly they're all down with it, right? Like 3 years later, that same person's like, oh yeah, I'm doing it. And it's like, that's cool. Well, you just stay open. Just please stay open to what might happen. Well, I reckon by November this year, we'll be seeing generative AI, which is hella scary because people were saying that was going to be like 2 years, 3 years, 5 years away. There's robots you can buy now which are doing stuff. I mean, Chat GPT 4.0 or 4.0 is like, but this one is just a game changer, and you're seeing the AI communities and businesses all infighting, freaking out, bailing. It's really scary on that level. The ethics of AI, I think that's a problem. I think we need ethics around it. What was it? Elon Musk, I saw an interview saying you need to make sure that the AI is curious, but also has, morals and coded, so that we stay safe. I read a book from this guy James Lovelit or Lovegrave, I forget his name. Scientist. He'd been doing AI since some of the early 60s, and he reckons we're going to become like, it'll be hybrid, but they'll be the higher power. AI will control the narrative. I don't know, maybe though. I reckon we're going to become cyborgs. I don't think it's too far away.
And how long have you been using AI for?
I would say late last year. Wow, we've gone fast, eh? No, midway through last year. Yeah, people already, I think 2022, people were saying, hey, what's this? Check this out. Like, I use Midjourney because it's the most sort of like intuitive for me. DALL-E, I started with that. I think that's 3 now. I was on 1. Midjourney 3, I think I was on. Now it's on 6. I think early adaptation of things is good. I actually, from a economical point of view, there's 2 things. 1, train yourself in AI because you'll need to. It's essential because it's going to be. It's like email, right? It's like everyone was like, I'm not going to use email. It's like, okay, we all got email. And you have to have email, or I'm not going to have a smartphone. Everyone's got a smartphone. So the other side of it is the economical side. Cryptocurrency is 100% going to happen. So get ahead of it because already the banks are starting to do it. But also AI, be an early adapter. Just do it. You don't have to use it. The other beautiful thing is you just use it how you want to use it. And it's the same as a smartphone. It's like, you don't have to have all the apps.
And what do you think is the greatest challenge of being an artist?
Well, I think in this time, I've never had such an economic challenge and moral challenge to be an artist. With the way that art is seen in society, I think that's the challenge that has got me the most. Yeah. Just massively, like just dropped suddenly, just mid 23, just, and now this last 2 quarters, it's just crazy. And the vibe around creative, right across the board, like I think music's taking a real big hit because of AI as well. I think, visual art's taking a big hit because of AI. I think the economy, this particular economy, I like to think of New Aotearoa as similar to Hawaii. I sort of have got to compare. I don't know what, I guess it's way less people, maybe in a way. I don't know how many people live there, but I remind myself that we're an island. So, there's just this really tricky, we're so interconnected with the rest of the world, but we're just like not either. We're so far away. So to have success, you need to be so diverse with your skill set to actually have an income. I think that's the hardest part about what's happened now. I mean, I've never seen such a drop in art, and it's really sad. It's made me sad, and so I've actually stopped making work for a while. I mean, the project with you is the first project I've done since January, I think. I'm making work, but I'm not trying to make people see my work.
Do you ever not feel inspired to make art?
In the past, my work ethic is really high, so I'd be like, okay, I just push through that, keep going, keep making it, don't stop. I do think it's important to keep making art. It's just maybe you don't have to do it at the levels that you were. It's okay to slow down and reassess and refocus. I think now's a good time for that, for me.
As an artist, do you have gallery representation, or are you an independent artist?
See, that's a really interesting question, because my whole philosophy is anti-establishment, i.e. with the art world. Like, I'm not attracted to the fine art scene, but it's very relative to people who are artists and they didn't get the joy of working on the street and people seeing your work, or they didn't have that connection the way that I've ended up with it, but they've also got a different scope to get their work seen, and it's maybe accepted more in our society, just to a certain degree. So for me, urban art galleries have been underrepresented, and they've come through places like Limb Gallery and Fixate Gallery, amazing, but obviously they've also come under the economic times, and so yeah, both those galleries are just on pause at the moment, and they've represented me in the past, but for example, at the end of last year I did a studio sale. I do one every year, so it's work that I've made and work that I make, and I just do it all online, all on Instagram. I just do it in the stories, and it's so successful. It's like art to the people directly. So back in the day, we used to do it with Cut Collective as well. We used to do these sales, and we'd have FBOS machines, set up a barbecue, put the word out. Back then it was flyers, and we'd kill it. We'd make like $27,000 in a day, and to me, that's the real roots of people power, and it's happening. I think recessions and hard times also are beautiful things, because they make people evolve, and I think we're in a cycle of evolution now, so it'll do its thing.
In circling back to a recent, more significant exhibition, which does not have any commercial imperatives to sell work, could you tell me about your involvement with Shift in the Canterbury Museum and your reflections of that particular exhibition?
Yeah, what a great thing. So Ruben Woods, his second name, wasn't it? He reached out to me, and obviously like a bunch, 30 other artists, and there was probably more on the list, but so he had the privilege of, I think he came up with the idea too. He was working at the Canterbury Museum, and then they were going to bowl it, refurbish it. So then he thought, let's paint it before they do that. And I think he reached out December last year, and he was like, we're going to do it in January. I was like, dude, really? Okay. But what a cool opportunity. I mean, in saying feeling uninspired, that was really inspiring. That was, that's a type of project that just creates inspiration. One, that's paid, you got a budget, not a huge budget, but you've got the flights and accommodation and per diems. And then two, just like paint pretty much whatever you want to paint, and we'll help you paint it. And then you just connect with all your artists friends, I mean, I reflect back to earlier in the conversation, the Hip Hop Summit did that too. And that was awesome for that. And also, as Cut Collective, we exhibited at the Auckland City Art Gallery and the Dowse Gallery. And it was the same thing. It was like, here's a budget, make work for work's sake. And collectively put on a show. The collectiveness of artists is a superpower. 150%. You cannot fault that. The artists feel it, the people feel it, the place feels it, and it just pumps energy into things beyond, for years to come. It was really cool when everyone was sort of there in the last bit, in the days, and it was funny because everyone was sort of trying to paint right through to the last bit. Luckily, I was quite organised and had finished, but just the energy of being able to walk through and see everyone do their own thing and the respect that people would give to each other was so cool, and just especially the Kiwi artists. I mean, I think that connection, and also Christchurch, big ups to Christchurch for holding a torch, which is extremely expressive and important for this scene. I think this scene needs as much nurturing as possible, and Christchurch is doing that. One of the things that Ross said, he was like, man, we have got so much to try and do to even get close to what Christchurch is doing. I feel sad that Auckland can't do that.
Shift was obviously an amazing exhibition, and I mean, what are some other memorable projects you've been involved with in the past?
Back in the day, we did one at Dowse, and we did one at the German collective. That was early in the collective process, and the German commission helped pay that, and the British Institute helped pay for that. I think there was a lot of support for that, the urban art scene. And then also the Auckland City Gallery was keen to have us involved while they were refurbishing. It's sort of funny, you get the back seat. It's like, oh, let's get the naughty kids to paint us a picture while we do this flash thing to distract from the flash thing or whatever, the building site. I remember, it was a highlight because it wasn't in the actual main building, and then also we did one at the Dunedin City Gallery as well. That was phenomenal exhibition. That was cool because the approach to that was none of us could paint an individual piece. It was like you had to all be neutral, and so we all had to give up our style and paint the theme only, which was a legal tender, which talked about, I suppose, that real political fact that you're supposed to live a life. Actually, this was a cool theme. You're supposed to live a life that you get married, you have kids, you buy a house. And it's sort of ironic, being the age I am now, that you do those things, but it's like you win lotto, buy a house. You don't win lotto, whatever.
And on that note, from that particular exhibition, what was it like collaborating with Cut Collective? I mean, how was that, creative process navigated?
The same wavelength is really important. The same goal is the most important. All the other bits fall into place. If you have the same vision over here, hey, we want to do something, that is, the styles just all sort of dissolve into one, or the egos just get wiped out, because again, you see the collectiveness. I think it's similar to someone like your crew with G-Bag. You go do a massive piece, it's like, it doesn't matter who shaped the letters, it's like you got up that big. It was like one up crew, teamwork. It's massive, similar to the shift thing. It's like, it sort of feels like teamwork. It's, again, collectiveness is so underrated, and I think that the powers that be are trying to always break that down. I think that's been a beautiful part of graffiti culture, is that it's done that. You see crews like MSK and TMD lead that path of introducing new people into a crew, harboring and nurturing new talent. I've always tried to do that as well, because I had trouble when I was trying to come up, always trying to encourage young artists to do their thing and to show them that you can make, one, a living from art, and two, you can do what you want to do,
So fostering unity, embracing growth, and creating support mechanisms are all obviously important for the next generation. And I'm aware that each artist from Cut Collective has their own independent practice and careers, but I'm also interested to know if Cut Collective is still going as a group.
I think, we never killed it. Obviously, Ross and Hayley were a couple, they broke up. That sort of definitely slowed a lot of it down, because Hayley was very successful with her part of it too. She played an important role with the business side of it, the content, and also having female energy. I think female energy is really important. But in 2021, we came together and tried to do a massive wall in Cross Street. It was really Hayley, or Trust Me, and Phlox who wanted to do it, and they sort of wrote me in. I was a bit hesitant because we ended up having to pay to actually paint the wall. But yeah, because the building owner was like, that Wilson car park, they wouldn't want to pay for it. But luckily, I knew one of the ladies in there, so we managed to get some funding for it. And then, but it was a massive wall. I think we just wanted to sort of see if we could work together again, and yeah, we can work together. But everyone's got different ambitions and roles in their life, and just with kids and direction and stuff like that, it sort of takes priority. Ross and Hayley have got a son called Bo, who they had when we were first starting out. They had a baby really young, and or younger, and that's always been a priority for them, and so I've got a 13-year-old and an 8-year-old, and that's also top priority for me as family, so when you have to sacrifice something else for the greater good of a collective, unfortunately, that's the thing that has to go. It's like a band, right? I definitely have often segued them together. The fact that they're like a band, it's like a band member.
Will Cut Collective ever recruit any new up-and-comers?
I mean, we'd love to, but the street art scene, I guess, really hasn't been active in the city since that sort of heyday. I think it died off like 2014. I think the council came down pretty hard on all art. The Rugby World Cup like squashed heaps of art in the city. Obviously graffiti, big time, but also any murals that were up or stickers, they went hard on it. So it sort of was like pretty sad. And we were at a point where we couldn't be that point, where we couldn't harbour new talent or give new talent or really support it. I've definitely tried with a few people and tried to encourage them, but I also think Auckland again just has a wrong fucking attitude towards like public space. Yeah, it's a very difficult, you just get taken out. In the last 5 years, I've just felt people are more worried about their wall being a nice colour, one colour. It's sad, man. It's really sad. And so that freedom for expression, it just doesn't exist as much. There is room for it. I think we need more curators and people like yourself and people like, that's what Ross is doing. We need us older crew now, or older crew, to try and be involved in those placemaking places. In our conversation at the Pavilion, I thought about that more, and I'm like, really does need to happen. I think we've got the right now to apply for those roles, which might engage those spaces. I think one of the interesting questions you asked me at the Pavilion was like, what art makes you think of Aotearoa? And Māori art is obviously one of those key players in that. So supporting that is really important. But I've been downtown with this project that Ross is doing down there, and the council have employed him to engage the Strand Arcade. And just in the weekend, he, working with Gene Rivers as well, another artist and DJ who works within the council, had people like Sky Pirates through, another local art crew in there, just engaging the space, doing ciphers, rapping, and it was like popping off, and this is what we need. So heaps of the tourists were coming through and buying Sky Pirates gear, and it worked. And you're like, it works. So there's a lot of hope out there with that stuff. Whereas Christchurch saw it happening, right? And I was in the Christchurch City Art Gallery and I was fucking fascinated because one old lady, she must have been 65 or 70, was like, "We love street art and graffiti. It's made our city come alive. It's the best thing since the earthquakes. You know, it's expressive, it's told our stories, and it is 100% true. It works."
As well as being an artist, I understand that you also sat as a trustee of the Devonport Arts Festival. What was your involvement in that event?
That was interesting. It was so I moved to Devonport in 2011. We bought a ex-state house over there, which was cool. And it wasn't the ambition to go and live on the shore. It was just a place to live. And it's a beautiful place to live, but it's different for sure than Central City. The Devonport Arts Festival was really interesting. It started in the 1950s and was always sort of involved with that wine and food festival thing they used to have in the park area down by the waterfront. So they'd do all sorts of things like have orchestras on barges and painting exhibitions and pottery, you know, and cool stuff, you know, art festival sort of vibe. And in the 90s there was some sort of like, you know, someone stole some money from the trust and sort of folded. And then this woman who's now a councillor, Tony Van Tonda, she picked it up in 2011 or 12 and got together with a couple other local artists and got me to paint something. And then she tried to keep it going for a couple of years, got a little bit of funding, and then we sort of reignited the trust. And again, just trying to get that community together. It worked for a little bit, and then it sort of just fizzled out. But it started like a little street art trail over there, so you can sort of go and check out some, you know, and not just graffiti stuff, which is sort of cool. Yeah, I think it shows how you can make it work.
And what was your involvement in the Vauxhall School project?
Yeah, so there's this cool project which the Ministry of Education has done where they, it's called Creative in Schools. So that was my kids' school, Vauxhall School. They also are very big with art. So they used to they don't do it anymore, unfortunately, because of COVID, but it was called VIFA, and it would be like a massive art show. And then a bit like the school art shows, right? All about contemporary artists or exhibiting artists exhibit their work, people buy it, and the school takes 30%. And, you know, they'd smash it, like, you know, and it would raise heaps of money. But anyway, the Creative in Schools is just an artist comes into a school and then works with the kids for 100 hours, which is a long time actually. And you then produce a wall, or something. You do a project, and I produced this project for my kids' school, which I think is actually a really beautiful thing, like to make art for kids.
That sounds amazing, and an incredible segue to the next question, which is about family life. So how do you find a balance between art and your family?
Now I'm becoming more of a stay-at-home dad because of work slowing off, and my wife, big ups to her, Helen, she's a super cool lady. She's a midwife, and so she's working more to basically support us. And so I'd done that job for a long time, and then we had our second child, and that meant that she was going to be at home more, and so I just kept it coming in. But we've been always very realistic about our outgoings and what we can afford, and I again, because of my childhood, I'm trying to break a cycle, so I've been intensively there with my kids, present. And really present, and just trying. So I was actually talking to Ross about this yesterday. They're my everything, they're my world, which is cool. It's like they trump my art, like if they need me, it's like, sweet, I'll just delay the job or whatever. But it's a balance, you have to still hit deadlines and stuff. And
what would be 3 pieces of advice you would give to new dads?
Try and sleep whenever you can, in any position. Get used to that if possible. Be present, like hang out as much as possible. Sacrifice for that early time. I think those first 2 years, they say in neurodevelopment, is the most important. So don't sleep on that, as in, sleep when you can, but don't. And then just, I think, defy the gender roles. Like don't slip into those places where it's just the mum, but also respect those roles as well. That's probably the two pieces of advice. But yeah, maybe don't listen to advice would be the third. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's a dangerous territory when you're telling people with parenting. It's like, but I think just engaging with them and being their friend and just hanging out with them is, you're going to be their parent too. It's a pretty cool journey, so you want to be there as much as possible. Yeah.
What would be 3 pieces of advice you would give to an aspiring artist who wants to step into a studio practice or operate within the realms of urban art and public spaces?
Learn Photoshop and AI. That would be the first. That's what I always say to a young artist. Believe in yourself, because it does happen, and keep true to that vision that you might have. Keep true to your dream. I think it's important. But yeah, be realistic that it's not bad to have a part-time gig too.
In closing, are there any acknowledgements or shout-outs you'd like to make to any people who have supported or helped you along your journey?
Wellby Ings was massive. Like, that guy just gets praise whenever I can of just the influence. I think the graffiti scene in Auckland has been massive. I think people like Askew have been very influential and helpful and supportive of keeping things going within the scene. I think that's helped. I think my colleagues like Ross, Lou, Haley, Gary, my collective, those people have just really believed in what I'm doing, and vice versa. And just the art, I think the art community in Auckland it's really strong. It's really positive. There's a lot of really nice people, and I think it's the graffiti and art and urban art scene in Auckland is a really positive place. So yeah, you're an inspiration. You're a doctor. This is good. You can be a world renowned graffiti artist and a doctor. That's inspiring, bro. It's good.
All right, bro, I think that's a wrap for our conversation. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for sharing your stories about your art, the people in your inner circle, and how I think AI is now playing a role in your art and ultimately, globally, eventually, I think. Even though you're stepping a bit more into a dad role, I really can't wait to see you do more of your art, because I know that the hardships of being an artist, particularly in this time, they won't last forever. To our audience, if you've managed to sit through the entire video, we hope that was insightful, and a huge thanks to Ed from Eke Panuku Development for funding this project and continuing to enable public art to be accessible for the community. We hope that by providing the pavilion as a platform for artists to showcase their work, it can help to enrich some of the spaces which are used by the community. So thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode of the Pavilion Project. Peace.